Torah Shmos, page 98, first column. We're in the middle of the paragraph that begins with Pilakshim. Okay, we'll start again quickly there. Okay, so now the Rebbe is explaining how do you mamshech this level of Elokus into Gan Eden, into the world. So he said that's the level of Mishnah, which is Chochmah, which is the Tanoim, that had Kabbalah, Mimeish Rabbeinu, and all that is the level that brings down Kedusha into the world. And then the Pasuk says, the Bilakshim, the 80 concubines is Brises, and he says, that's the few first part we learned already. The concubines, that the Yichud Amalek Ima Rak Bekrav Atznei is only temporary. The same thing, the revelation of Bryce, of Chochmah, that comes into Bryce. By Mishnah it's constant, like the wife that's constantly with the husband. But this is the Bryce, the concubine. Like it said, but any Bryce that wasn't learned in the Yeshiva Rabbi and Rabbi, which are not definite. Because like it says, 3,000 halachos were forgotten in the morning period of Moshe Rabbeinu. For Kachi, Masnita, the same thing, any Braisa. That were not learned in the Yeshiva Rabbi Yeshe. Not necessarily for sure. The Gemara can say the Braisa is wrong, which the Gemara does. Why? Because they don't have the Sirusa de La'ela, the level from above, from Eden to Elyon. V'hainu, why is that? He says, now this is where we're up to. Because Mishnah is an Atzilus, like it says, the level of Chochmah, short and sweet, Bittul. Like Rabbi Lazar said, 12 I heard, 18 I didn't hear. Hakavi ben Malal said, I heard it from the majority, you didn't hear it. You know, all these things, it's complete Bittul. Yeah.
So the writer should be higher than Mishnah.
In a certain respect, it is, but it's not officially. Officially, Torah Shem itself is greater than Torah Shem Al-Peh. Because Brises come from Bria and not Patzilis. And this is where we finish. Because Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Yud of Hashem's name, is revealed in Atzilis. Yud is Bittul, Chochmah. Which is bitter Hasheni, but Chochem is bitter with the level of Chochem. Alva b'masnita, but a Braisa. Is not bringing down the level of Atzilus, because again, Braisa is the world of Bria. Bria is already Yesh Mi'ayin. It's not complete bittul of Atzilus. Therefore, even in davening, we learned up to Haidu is Asiya. Psuke de Zimra is Yitzira. Birches Krishma is Bria. And Shmonesri is Atzilus. Yeah? That's why halachically, Shmonesri you have to stand, because it's bittul. But Krishma you could sit, because it's the world of Bria. Bria is a much lower level. What's the difference between standing and sitting? Standing, number one, is bittul. Sitting is not so much bittul. But number two, when you stand, you're in a higher level, you're taller than you are when you sit. So he says, there's not biramit, it's not as definite as Mishnah, only the Braise of Rabbi Rabbeishia, like we learned yesterday, which Yichud Elyon Demadu Man, nevertheless, even though the Braise of Rabbi Rabbeishia are real, nevertheless, they're only called Pilakshim, like a Pilagish, that's only a temporary unity with the husband, with the king. But a Mishnah, you can ask a question. If an Amida of the Gemara says a statement, and you have a question from a Mishnah, he's refuted. You know, completely refuted. Well, Lamaila, what is that Lamaila? What's the level of Mishnah in the spiritual realms? Down here it's Mishnah. What's the spiritual level of Mishnah up there? So he says, that's what the Chazal tell us, Michol Eimed Umakan Neshama Sadika Magabi Mizbeach. One of the functions of Malach Michal up there, he takes the Neshamas Yisrael and he puts him on the Mizbeach up there. There's a Mizbeach up there, which is the Birer ben Neshamas Aruyim Nechol B'Ein Sof Shul Prakim, something meaning like this. It doesn't mean over there you take a neshama and you put it on the fire. First of all, there's no physical over there. Okay? So it's all spirituality. So what does the spiritual fire mean? When you burn something on the fire, it becomes part of the fire. When you burn the neshamas on the mizbeach, it means these levels of neshama that are super great become burnt on the mizbeach, meaning they're completely consumed in the fire of godliness. Okay, that's the second half. So first you have Mishnahs, Shishim Hema, Shishim Hema Malchus is the third Mishnah. Pilakshim is Braisa, and then the pasuk continues, V'alames ein mispor, young maidens to no end. What does that refer to? Elo halachas. Shein mem, so Amiroim, those are the sayings of the Amiroim of the Gemara. That from that you can't ask a question. Like I'll say and explain. The Gemara says the expression Gavra Gava Karamis. It's like Abaye says something, so you can ask a question, but Rava said different. So he says different. So he's like, you're asking a question from person to person. He's not contradicting himself. Rava has one opinion, Abaye has another opinion. So Mishnah, if Abaye says something and the Mishnah says the opposite, so Abaye is refuted. But from the sayings of the Gemara, you can't refute anybody. I mean, you can refute later. Rishayim Achreinim, if the Gemara says something clearly, and a Rishon or an Achrim paskin differently than the Gemara, yeah, they're refuted. But in the era of the Gemara, of Halacha, which was established in the time of the Gemara, because they expounded on the Mishnah, explained it, brought out the halachas of it. So in those cases, so then you can't ask a question on a Mishnah, from a Gemara on the Gemara. What? What's a black hat rabbi mean? Because you could take a guy and put him on a black hat, put a black hat on him. It doesn't make him a rabbi.
No, he was a rabbi.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be a black hat. No.
He's an actor. Clear in my mind. Whatever written in Brisa is outside Torah. We do not need to keep. It's true or false.
It's apikursis to the ultimate extent. Mami, apikursis. The Rambam says, whoever doesn't believe even one letter of Torah does not believe at all in Torah. How can it be a Braisa? You know how many halachas we learn from Braisas?
But he says it's outside the Torah. That means we are not.
It's outside Mishnah. It's not outside Torah. If somebody learns a Braisa, do they get a mitzvah of learning Torah? Yeah. So how can it be, if it's not Torah, how can you get a mitzvah of learning Torah? It is, you take it even a step further. Beisham, the Gemara says, when there's argument Beisham and Beis Hillel, the halacha is like Beis Hillel. No, the halacha, the rule is the halacha is like Beis Hillel. To the extent the Gemara says, Beishamai, B'makom Beis Hillel, ain't a Mishnah. It's like non-existent. Okay? Now, if somebody would take a bunch of Beis Shamais and learn them, okay, does he get a mitzvah of learning Torah? 100%. The Gemara says, compared to Beis Hillel, it's not Mishnah, it's on halacha, but it's Torah. What do you mean you don't have to keep it? You know how many halachas the Shulchan Aruch learns from Braisa? The Gemara learns out halachas, countless halachas from Braisas, because Braisas go into more detail than Mishnah. Mishnah is short and sweet. Braisa is not as short and sweet. But a lot of halachas that the Mishnah doesn't say, we derive from the Braisa. It's mamish apikursis, by the way. He said you don't have to keep it. If it's contradicting a Mishnah, yeah, then the halacha is like the Mishnah. It doesn't mean it's not there, you don't have to keep it, whatever.
What happens between Matan Torah and Mishnah?
Yaakov, good question.
Rabbi Yehuda, a Chassid put everything into Mishnah. What happens? It's from
What?
generation to generation?
I didn't hear what you said. From Matan Torah to Mishnah, what happened?
Yes. What happened? What's going into Mishnah comes from generations of, goes from heart to heart to heart.
You ever learn Pirkei Avos? So the answer to your question is the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. You know what happened from Matan Torah to Mishnah? Is Moshe kibel Torah Sinai and gave it to Yeshua. Yeshua's Canaan, Vim, Tzurah, Shekinah, Zagadela. Yeah? And then as the first pair goes into the evolution of the generations. Correct? Into Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Which means like this. When Torah was given at Har Sinai, yeah, in the year 2448 after creation, Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu Torah Sheb'Ksav and Torah Sheb'al Peh. Torah Sheb'Ksav was written. Torah Sheb'al Peh was not allowed to be written. It's not allowed to be written. Torah Sheb'Ksav, even till today. Torah Sheb'Ksav, in Shulchan Aruch it says you're not allowed to say it by heart. This that we say, like Shema Yisrael and all those things by heart, it says something that everybody knows, then it's okay to say by heart. The Rebbe said many times, the Rebbe a lot of times when he quoted a pasuk, he misquoted it. And the Rebbe said the reason, he says, because you're not allowed to say a pasuk by heart, so by changing a word, it's not a pasuk. So therefore you're allowed to say it by heart. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so what happened? So Hashem gave Torah Sheb'Ksav and Torah Sheb'al Peh. Okay, Torah Sheb'Ksav is 24 books, as it's called in English, of scriptures. Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Exile. It's all given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. Then Moshe Rabbeinu was also told the oral Torah. Which, by the way, you can have a great teacher called Hashem, you can have the best student called Moshe Rabbeinu, but in 40 days, to learn infinite Torah Sheb'al Peh is impossible. So that's why it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was forgetting. Hashem gave it to him as matana. Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkei. What does it mean? We say Shachris and Shabbos. B'matnas chelkei means a matana Hashem gave him of Torah. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was... Okay. And then Moshe Rabbeinu taught that oral Torah to Yeshua to the Skein. Okay? There's a whole process, Rashi says in Chumash how it went. That went on for generation to generation to generation. All what they said before was the Kabbalah, Kabbalah, the receiving of the oral tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody said their own things. It was all accepted Torah, like he said, 12 things I heard, 18 things I didn't hear. Okay? So then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saw that people would get, there was Galus, there was Yuridas Aderes, the generations were going downward. You can imagine even then they were going downward. So what did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi do? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi went against Torah. And he quoted a pasuk, Eis lasis lashem hefedu Torah secha. David HaMelech says until him, it comes a time to save it, hefedu Torah secha, they have to nullify the Torah. And the Rambam gives a mashal for this. It's like a doctor sometimes, God forbid, has to amputate a limb to save the life. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, if we don't write it down, it will not happen. It will not be anymore. Right? It's going to be forgotten. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gathered the whole story in the back of the Gemara Brachas. So you could take the new books from ArtScroll and the Talmud, whatever, introduction to... Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was very, very wealthy. He gathered all the Skenim, all the Talmidei Chacham in his time, for years. And everybody said everything that they were makabel from their rabbis, and their arguments, and the machlekes, and it, yeah? And then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi sat down with all these people, and gathered it all, and he edited Mishnah. Then what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't put into the Mishnah, but it was still orally handed down from generation to generation, so they left it outside the Mishnah. Not Chas v'Shalom, it's not Torah. They left it out of Mishnah, and it was called Braisa, which means outside. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Chi and Rabbi Shia were the authoritative editors of Braisa.
You teach us every day.
I do? I don't know.
From what we learned, maybe you remember maybe 1% or 2%.
If you're lucky.
If you're like, so how could things go from
If I would remember everything I would learn, I would know how to learn. No.
How could it go without being written from generation to generation to generation to generation, and
That's because, with all due respect to you and me, we're brainless. Those people were intelligent. They didn't forget. What does the same Pirkei Avos? Okay? These people didn't forget. I tell you, they tell a story about the Rashba. I never saw it printed. I heard, Torah Shabbat Peh. Rashba once came into a city, into a country that he did not know the language. He didn't know the language of and he went into a lecture hall. A guy made a lecture in that foreign language he didn't know. Okay, he didn't know it at all. It was like a 45-minute lecture. When the guy finished the lecture, the Rashba repeated the lecture verbatim, frontwards and then backwards.
In foreign language?
Yeah, in a foreign language he didn't know. Now, when was the last time you did that? I can't even repeat one sentence in the language I do know.
forward.
So you're talking about, again, our generation has more information. We are not smarter than they were. In Reb Hillel Parich's time, it was after the outbreak of the Rebbe's time, it was not uncommon that a 13-year-old kid knew Shas by heart. It was not uncommon. That means most kids at 13 knew Shas by heart. Okay? How many kids today at 13 know Shas by heart? Okay. So what? First of all, they didn't have the distractions we have today. Right? We have a lot of distractions they didn't have. But secondly, they were pushing smarter.
Does it have anything to do with intelligence? Because the need of that time required for them to memorize it. At our time, we could add. The new generation, if they don't have a calculator, that doesn't mean you're very smart.
By the way, does anybody know their family, the kid's number, the wife's number, the husband's number? Nobody knows anymore. You have to go look.
That's right.
We grew up, we used to memorize, we knew numbers, phone numbers.
No, it's Siri.
Huh?
Siri call mom.
Yeah, whatever.
Call somebody, ask them for address. What do you mean Google it? They can't give you address anymore.
In my days growing up, you wanted to travel from Chicago to New York. You went to AAA, and they gave you this big map, and they highlighted the freeways, the highways, they were called it, from Chicago to New York, and then today,
There are these kids that made a lot of money in Bitcoin. They have $100,000 watch.
no,
But they can hardly read analog.
I know. They don't know how to tell time on a normal clock. Yeah, so I'm saying, you asked me, okay, let's get back to the point. See, you asked me, what did they do in Torah Shabbat Peh? They remembered, and then it was handed down, and therefore, that's why you have a machlekes.
So from Matan Torah to Rabbi Yehuda, in this period of time, everything was authentic to what Moshe Rabbeinu.
Correct.
And we are relying on the smartness and brilliance of...
No, I'm missing one word, and the Kedusha. These were lofty neshamas.
Yeah.
They were holy people.
That's what
Rabbi, how do we know Yehuda Hanasi was able to save it? And those things are exactly what it was in Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's what Torah is all about. That was the greatness of Torah. That Torah Shabbat Peh was gathered by these holy tzaddikim that weren't interested in changing the laws or reforming them or whatever doing to them. And they kept the laws as it is. And Hashem says that's Torah.
And then Yehuda put everything into Mishnah.
Right.
And then
Then the Gemara,
right again.
Then the Gemara, because it was short and very abridged, and it wasn't clear. So in the time of the Mishnah, it was enough for people to understand, because again, they were smarter. So they understood all the details in the Mishnah. Then as the era ended, okay, because Tanoim is the ultimate of Torah Sheba'al Peh, right? Anshe Knesset Gedol, which was the beginning of, right after was the Tanoim. The Gemara era cannot argue on the Tana of the Mishnah. You can't say, okay, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says an opinion, Abai has different. You know, once the era of Tanoim ended, which was with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, then an America cannot argue on the earlier era. Even the first generation, the students of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so sometimes the Gemara says, very few, Rav Tanu Palag, Rav is a Tana, can argue on a Mishnah. Once in a blue moon, maybe once or twice in Shas, it says Shmuel Tanu Palag. Rabbi Yechanan says these were the disciples, the head disciples of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But even that generation, it wasn't said about everybody. Okay? So now, when the Amoraim ended with Ravina and Ravashi, when he compiled the Gemara the same way, Ravashi was also very, very wealthy, and he also did the same thing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did, and they worked out, I'm talking about Bavli, not Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yechanan, who was a student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, wrote Talmud Yerushalmi 100 years before Talmud Bavli, it says in the Gemara, right? And Yerushalmi is also different than Bavli. Yerushalmi, the whole Yerushalmi is this big. And Bavli is that big, you know? Okay. So, but once the era of Amoraim ended with Ravina and Ravashi, that's it. You can't. The Rambam can't argue on the Gemara. But after the era of the Gemara, just historically, there's a very short period of time called Rabbanim Savroi. I mean, the later Rabbanim. Okay, and then came the Goinim era. Reb Sadi Goin, Reb Amnon Goin, Bahai Goin, all the Goinim. And again, that era ended, then you have Rishonim, and then you have Achreinim. And now you have, let's leave it at that. So, the Rishon can argue on, generally speaking, they cannot argue on the Goinim. They definitely can argue on the Gemara. Because once an era ended in Torah, Torah says, this era is over. What's there here is ultimate. You can't argue on it. You can't change it. They can make Xeris later, but they can't undo a halacha.
So when they give a takana, it has to be within
The framework of Torah.
Acharon. They cannot argue.
The Achreinu cannot argue on the Rishonim. They can hold, like, if there's an argument Rishonim, so an Achron can hold like that Rishon. Another Achron can hold like the other Rishon. But they can't argue on a unified opinion of Rishonim. You have a lot of times in the Rishonim, Rabbi and Rav Yosef have an argument in the Gemara, yeah? So Taisus will paskin like one opinion, and Rambam will paskin like another opinion. But again, they're not arguing in a Tanoim. They're paskining like one of the Tanoim, or Amoraim, whatever.
So one could go this way and one could go this way.
Correct. And that applies today. You have, let's say, the Alter Rebbe was much before the Mishnah Berurah. The Alter Rebbe will paskin this way, and the Mishnah Berurah, let's say, will paskin this way. Right? So now you have the followers of the Alter Rebbe will paskin like the Alter Rebbe. The Litvisher crowd will paskin like the Mishnah Berurah. The Sephardic crowd will paskin like either the Beis Yosef or the Bavadia, or whatever it is, as their halachic authorities.
Then someone said that went against something Alter Rebbe said.
In 3 places he disagreed with Alter Rebbe. So, but when he disagreed, one place at least when he disagrees, it says, who am I to argue on my grandfather, but it's Torah and I disagree.
Which way do you go, Alter Rebbe?
So most of the time, like the Tzemach Tzedek, but there's one place which is a big argument to contemporary Lubavitcher Rabbanim if you pass on like the Alter Rebbe and Tzemach Tzedek. There's a din if, let's say, somebody is a righty. Okay, so a righty puts on tefillin on the left hand. A lefty puts on tefillin on the left hand. So if a guy, let's say, does a bunch of things with the right, and especially writing, so he's a righty. Okay? What happens if a guy writes with the right and does everything else with the left? Or he does everything with the left, writing with the left and does everything with the right. There's an argument, Tzemach Tzedek and Alter Rebbe. But then it's a machlekes, and the Rabbanim paskin like the Alter Rebbe, you go by writing. The Alter Rebbe says you only go by writing. That's it. Doesn't matter if you do everything else with the other. Whatever. I'm not going into details. There's a million details. This detail, that detail. But I'm saying generally speaking. And a lot of people say you go like the Tzemach Tzedek. But that's the evolution of Torah, the way Torah came down. Somebody can't say today, okay, unless the Native Yehuda says this, but I differ. You can't. Native Yehuda is in time of the Baal Shem Tov. You can't.
In science you could.
In science you could. Because science is all theory.
Not all science. Physics,
Does science keep changing its mind? Let me ask you a question.
I'm just saying.
According to science, how old is the world?
No, not that science.
I'm asking science.
That's
Okay.
a theory. That's
Not theory, they say it's a fact.
not.
It's a disproven theory. Right? So let's say, so there's a machlekes in science, yeah? One says 10 million and another one says 5 million, let's say, right? Okay, whatever. That's a pretty big difference, 5 million years of the world. We're only 5,785. A million years, and you're taking the arguments in 5 million years. Okay, the reference point, and if that's only normal, whatever, the carbon height, or whatever it's called, carbon dating, but that's if things don't happen in the middle. Like based on the beginning of Earth, the way Earth changes, so according to that change, it's a million years old, yeah? But the flood in 40 days changed the world, like it would take 1 million years. So what do you have your dating?
Wow.
Anyway, we got off topic.
But Earth goes around the sun doesn't go